Hello, this is Veronica. Today I will be discussing the warehouse expansion and environmental impact, along with the community well-being in the Inland Empire. First, we will talk about the warehouse impact on CO2 emissions. Then we'll talk about stakeholders and policy alternatives and lead into evaluation matrix justification and final recommendations. For the problem analysis with the warehouse emissions in the Inland Empire, the Inland Empire has become one of the largest warehousing and logistic hubs in the country due to its proximity to ports and major transportation corridors. This rapid growth has resulted in an increased truck traffic and higher exposure to air pollutants, particularly fine matter known as PM2.5. According to regional data, these environmental impacts are concentrated near residential communities that are often lower income and Black and Brown communities. This matters because environmental exposure is closely linked to health and overall quality of life. Several nonprofit stakeholders are directly impacted by warehouse related policies, and they've joined forces to combat this. Environmental justice organizations focus on reducing pollution exposure and advocating for cleaner land use practices, while public health nonprofits monitor respiratory illnesses and heat related risks tied to industrial development. For the three policies we'll be taking a look at, the Clean Air Act. This is the policy that, as is at the federal level, the Clean Air Act establishes air quality standards and regulates emissions from vehicles and industrial sources. California has expanded on this framework through climate legislation, including Senate Bill 535 and Assembly Bill 1550, which direct cap and trade funds toward disadvantaged communities experiencing higher pollution burdens. The Clean Air Act anticipated outcomes include significant reduction in harmful pollutants, improved public health, and enhanced ecosystem health through stricter regulations and localized action plans. The anticipated budget for this project is $235.9 million, according to the Center for Clean Air Policy. The second policy for consideration that involves less government would be the Commercial Clean Vehicle Tax Credit. This allows for businesses to receive up to $50,000 for purchasing qualified commercial clean vehicles. This is a 25% increase from the current act in place, which would have an anticipated outcome of increased electrical vehicles by 35%. This would take a total of 3 months to implement this change, and there's an estimated taxpayer claim amount of $14.4 billion, according to the Department of Treasury. The third suggestion would be the public metro intervention, which involved the most amount of government, with a plan for zero emission freight and transit program by introducing 2 electric light rails. The anticipated outcome would be to reduce community CO2 emissions and decrease truck emissions, with Benchmark Minerals reporting 55% of all, apologies. This would be a long-term 10-year plan and anticipated cost of $8 to $10 billion. Taking a look at how we would evaluate these policies, we would incorporate the current SECA guidelines to determine whether the activity is subject to environmental review, what steps are involved in the environmental review process, and the required content of environmental documents. And we would also incorporate how in depth the policy is protecting disadvantaged communities, and also evaluate the cumulative impact. And this is important because the project's overall contributions may be individually and incrementally insignificant, but would make a considerable contribution to the overall cumulative impact and be cumulatively statistically significant when combined with existing conditions. The existing, often hazardous environmental conditions in DACs or disadvantaged communities must be taken into account when evaluating cumulative pollution burden impacts. The failure to consider cumulative impact means that the pollution burden on inland environmental justice communities would continue to grow. The final recommendation would be the Clean Air Act, as it establishes the qualities and standards and regulations for these emissions from vehicles in California, especially with the Senate Bill 535 and Assembly Bill 1550 take into account the disadvantaged communities and are going to align with the evaluation matrix of lifting the burden of on environmental justice communities. Thank you.